So today we'll, oh my God, it says, and I should record Chinatown. Okay, so I'm looking at my transcript, so sorry guys. I'll dismiss my transcript because it says weird things and I shouldn't be saying them. So we talked quite a lot last time about the various types of energy generation technologies. So we talked about turbines and we discussed about all sorts of turbines. We talked about internal combustion engines, and we also talked about solar panels, which is where we focused also the first part of our conversation this morning. Well, it's not really morning, but anyway. Now, there is a little exercise I want you to have a go at today. And that is, it's a little bit of group work, and it's mostly to have us thinking a little bit what types of energy technologies can be used for certain types of activities in a day. So let me, so what I need to do, let me share my slides first. Here it is, okay. So I'll share all the slide deck with you, so you have all the types of energy we discussed about. But really, the activity we're talking about today is, I mean, right now, is this one. So you'll work in groups, and you'll need to think of the UK's demand curve for a typical summer day. I mean, all of that is in the slide deck, so you will have that. And then you need to take a look at that and say, right, okay, what power stations, what kind of technologies could potentially supply that energy? And it's not necessarily that, you know, there is one correct answer. There can be many correct answers here, and many ways to justify your decisions. But what I want you to do is to go through that thinking process of, you know, that not everything fits everywhere. So certain power stations are better working in those hours when demand is peaking, or other power stations might be better at other times of the day, and so on. So I'd want you to just have a go at it and be open-minded and be speculative about it. So don't worry if you feel that, oh my God, I'm not really sure what is the correct answer. Chances are there are, you know, numerous correct answers, and everything depends on how the grid is organized and how the country's supply is organized and so on. So chances are you will be correct with whatever you say, but it will just give us a good opportunity to have this conversation about, you know, what is working where and what do we need to be thinking of before we make such decisions. So what I'll do, maybe first thing is to share this slide deck with you. So if I do, so can you still see my slides, or has it stopped showing them?
Yeah, we can see it.
Yeah, okay, that's good. And then I'm gonna go in our chat and I'm gonna pop the slides in the chat. Hopefully this will work. No, it didn't like it. Let me try this again. So if I do this once more, because previously it told me that the file already exists, but I don't think I've shared with you these slides. Have I? Have I shared with you before this slide deck, the slides we're having today?
I don't think so, Professor.
No, yeah, exactly. I thought the same, and I haven't. I'm a little bit surprised that it insists that I have. Not least because I cannot see it anywhere. Okay, can you see what I've shared with you right now? It's in the chat. So hopefully it works.
Yes.
Yes,
I see it.
Yes. Okay. Okay, so if you open there and you go towards the end, you will see the slide I'm sharing with you. That includes the group work. And immediately after, it has a couple of curves with electricity demand on a winter day and a summer day and so on. And that's that. Does it work for all of you? Can you all open it? Does anybody have a problem with the slides I've shared? No? Okay. So if that's okay for everyone then, so what I'll do is I'll split you in groups now. Let me see how many groups that let us do. Oh, wow, it keeps. Okay. It has kept the old rooms when we've previously done the exercise. So I'll have to remove those rooms and do new rooms, create rooms. So we will do 6 rooms, maybe 5 rooms, create. Oh, here we go. Okay, that takes some time, but it should be ready very soon. Okay, here it is. So, and then
Sorry, Prof. Can you hear me?
Yes, until the end, and to take into consideration also the
Hello
possible.
and welcome back. Probably not everybody's back yet, but I think, yeah, probably now everybody's back. Okay, good. So I know you've all had your own conversations within your groups, and what I want to do is, I mean, I'm sure some of you have very different responses than others. So I want to invite you voluntarily to say if anybody, you know, wants to share with us some of what your teams have done, what your thinking was. What I need to highlight again and again is that there is no wrong answer, so don't worry about it. We'll be talking about all the possible options in a way of, you know, understanding how risky they might be, or how possible they might be, or how or what we need to have in place to make them more secure, and so on. So anybody wants to have a first go and let us know what has been discussed within your group? Nobody? Come on. I'm sure somebody has something to say.
Maybe I can start.
Yes, please, go ahead.
Okay, it was me and Giuseppe in the work group. We look at the night hours. So from 11:30 to 5 in the morning. So the demand is very low during that hours, and we thought that maybe the wind energy could be a possible solution to respond to that demand. We look for the wind turbines that the UK has both onshore and offshore to see if they have the capacity to respond to that demand. And we know that the wind energy is not constant, so maybe the wind can be very strong some days and provide enough energy, and other days not enough. But in average, during the year, there is enough wind that provides quite a lot of energy in the UK. So we thought that considering that the demand during the night is quite low, the onshore wind turbines can be enough. And if the night is not very windy, then maybe the offshore turbines can provide more energy because they are installed in the sea where there is more wind. And there is always the problem about when the night is not very windy. So maybe an energy like produced by the steam turbine, I think, or other kind of non-renewables also can provide the energy that is missed to respond to the demand. I don't know if Giuseppe wants to say something more.
You was perfect, but yeah, you were perfect. And so in conclusion, we think that wind energy could provide the demand of during the night, because yeah, the variability is a risk, but I think UK, the capacity of the installation could accept that risk. And yeah, this is the conclusion, Prof.
Okay, good. So thank you very much. So what we're having here is a particular segment of the 24 hours, and that can be addressed with what your colleague said. You know, that could be only wind. And the truth is that this has happened in the UK. It doesn't happen every day, and it's not the easiest thing to happen, but it's not something that is impossible. It sounds radical. Yeah, it sounds like, oh my God, only wind, 100% wind. How is that, you know, doable? If you were to tell that 20 years ago to any energy regulator, they would shut you down immediately. They would say, this is stupid. You know, nobody would ever do that. Nobody relies on wind, you know, for any significant amount of time ever. But we know now that this is happening. This has happened for several nights in the UK and in Denmark and in other countries. So it's not totally insane to think that this is a real possibility. And why does it work like that? It works like that because at nighttime you have lower demand for energy. And at certain periods of the night, depending on the season, wind, particularly offshore wind, can be very strong. So you have a lot of supply and very little demand within the country. So wind energy, even though normally it is not, I mean, you know, during daytime, wind can very rarely produce enough energy to supply all the country. In nighttime, it can actually happen. I've posted a little picture here. I don't know if you can see it. Can you see the graph I've posted in the chat?
Yes.
It is for the last week, the wind energy output. So I've just put it there for you to take a look, and I will be posting all of the types of energy that I have available for the last week. It's important for you to take a look and see the variability. And of course, that is variability for that specific week. Different weeks would have different variability. But to see how exactly it could look like. Because I think it's quite important for all of us to understand, like, for example, at about, you know, in the afternoon hours of Tuesday, wind has been doing the peak production. Yeah, that was 13.4 gigawatts. It's quite a lot of wind generation. It's not huge. Wind in the UK has produced a lot more in other times that it was more windy. But for that week, that was the peak production. And in the same week, a few days later, on Saturday morning, it was producing about, you know, 1.5 gigawatts. So less than, almost 10 times less. So there is this variability, and it is quite significant. It's not a trivial variability. So it's a good, you know, it's a good thing for all of us to think of and try to understand, you know, what's happening here. Why do you have these enormous differences? But that is the nature of wind power supply, that at certain times it will be doing an amazing contribution, and at other times it will be doing no contribution. And exactly because the wind energy contribution is very low cost and is low carbon and all of that, ideally you want to be designing an energy system that can absorb that energy when it is there and can still be stable and secure when that energy is not there. So that is the challenge. We have sources of energy that are low cost and low carbon, but we have to find clever ways of, you know, making them work for us. So that's what it looks like for wind. I'll be showing you one of these, you know, little slides as we go on for the other sources of energy, just to trigger more conversation. Any questions so far before I invite more speakers? No? Okay, so who wants to go next then?
I can speak.
Sure,
I can go next.
Go ahead. That's Eva.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Eva, go ahead. Yeah.
So we took into consideration all the day from midnight to midnight actually, and we wanted to rely the most on renewable energies. So as the other colleagues, we thought that during the night, since there is low demand, we can supply energy with wind power. However, since there can be some lack of supply according to the wind, we added also some electricity coming from steam turbines. We were a bit undecided between steam turbine and gas turbine, because we saw that actually UK rely mostly on gas for electricity generation, but at the same time we wanted to be more carbon free, and so steam turbine can also be fueled with biomass, nuclear waste, and so we decided to keep that, the steam turbine. Then between 6 a.m. and 8 a.m. there is an increase in the demand for energy, and so there probably we need steam turbine or gas turbine to add to the wind source of energy. And then during the day, we since there is a high demand, but also daylight in summer, we also included solar energy. Until more or less 6 p.m., in which the demand starts to decrease, and also the night arrives. So we removed solar energy, and we kept with wind energy and or gas turbine or steam turbine. Yeah. This was our reasoning. Yeah, if one of the colleagues want to add something, if I forgot something, otherwise.
No, I think Eva was perfect. Just one consideration. We were discussing between steam turbine and gas turbine, and we thought that the main difference is in the startup time. So gas turbine is really rapid, and steam turbine is more slower. So we thought that maybe steam turbine can be used as supply for base load, let's say. So like for the entire day, during the entire day, of course, because of the time of activation. So when you start the steam turbine, then it goes on all the day. And gas turbine, maybe we can use that in the phase where the supply is, so the demand is really high and is rapidly increasing. Of course, always as an alternative to renewables. So when renewables aren't enough.
Correct. No, this is a good way of thinking about it. And indeed, if you are to think, like, there are countries which rely quite a lot on steam turbines for their energy. So you would see that they have something like 80–90% of their electricity covered by steam turbines. And the way they do that is, of course, they try to plan ahead. So, for example, they know that at some point in the day, electricity demand will start growing significantly. So they start pushing their steam turbines to produce more energy earlier on, so that when the demand actually increases, the steam turbine is already producing more energy and they can plug that energy on the grid. So it's a matter of using that kind of forecasting. But of course, steam turbines cannot respond immediately to demand changes, and that can be quite dangerous. So usually these countries, they also have gas turbines to do the more detailed demand following. And in the background, the steam turbines are picking up as much of that as they can. So that's a typical structure that you have there. And of course, when you have, a lot of renewables, then it can be a lot more messy, because renewables can be producing or not producing, or it can be mayhem. So what I have to show you here, I've posted another little picture here, which is gas use for electricity generation for the last week. I want you to take another look, and I want you to see now. Gas looks a little bit more, periodic and periodically correct in here. So, do you see any periodicity in things that you observe here? Do you want to share something, some thoughts on this graph? So gas is a very expensive type of electricity right now. So if you can avoid using it, you will avoid using it, because gas is very expensive these days. So if you could avoid using it, you would. So what do you see here? At which?
Professor, I don't know if it's just me, but I don't see anything. I only see you.
Do you see in the chat? There is a purple graph.
Yes, I see it.
Yeah, is there anybody who cannot see the purple graph in the chat?
Okay, I see it now. Sorry.
Okay, good. Okay,
I
so
guess.
click on that. So click on that, so it becomes a bit bigger, and you can actually see it. And what you can see as a first observation,
that at night the demand is down.
correct. So at nighttime demand falls down. Why is that happening? Because this is what you see is not demand, is gas use. Yeah, so gas use falls down, and the reason is because demand is lower. So we don't need a lot of electricity at nighttime. So we allow other power stations to pick up as much of the demand as possible, and we reduce gas as much as possible. But in the afternoons, every day, demand is peaking, around, like 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, thereabouts. Demand is as high as it can be for gas. That is because domestic demand, household energy demand, is really growing a lot at these hours. So gas needs to kick in and respond and provide that energy. So if you see, there's a lot of variability in how we use gas in the UK. Some of that gas is on gas turbines, and some of that gas is on steam turbines. That's why it can be so flexible in that sense. The other thing I want you to see is take a look at what's happening on Tuesday. So out of all these days, the lowest gas use is on Tuesday, correct?
Yeah, it is the same. It is because on that day there was more wind.
Exactly. So if you see at the previous graph that I've posted, the one with the wind, Tuesday had a lot of wind generation. So that meant that wind was displacing gas. It wasn't so necessary to burn so much gas because wind was doing quite a good job. In terms of peaks and stuff, you can see gas at its peak provided 19.12 gigawatt hours, say 19 gigawatt hours, and wind at its peak provided 13.4 gigawatt hours. So they're not very different, if you see what I mean, yeah? They're not, they're a similar level of production. It's not like gas is, 10 times bigger than wind. So they could be providing almost, similar amounts of energy. So that's that. Any comments, any questions on that? And then we can move to the next speaker, if you have no questions. Okay, who wants to go next then?
I think I can go next.
Please go ahead.
Actually, my entire group is going next.
Okay.
Okay, so let's say we took into consideration the whole day, and of course we split it into night, first time of the day, like first hour of the day, and then from, let's say, 11 till 5, and then the evening time. So what we understood is that during nighttime, we don't need that much provision of electricity. So we thought that it was nice and also like useful to use some kind of electricity provision that is not gonna, doesn't have such a rapid startup. So we thought about combined cycle gas turbine, since it takes longer for the gas turbine to start. And of course, during night, we are not, like, there's no possibility to use photovoltaic or as much wind energy as we can do during the day. So we can use some that we store during the day before. And since we want to make sure that we have enough energy also during night, we introduce also fossil fuels for like safety purpose. So if anything or everything is not, like, if the electricity is not enough, we can produce it and as it have safety purpose during like freezing in the hospital or other stuff. And yeah, that's it for what we told for the night. So I'm done.
All right, thank you, Petra. Then also we had a look at the start of the day. So basically the morning hours from 6:30 until 11:30. And what you can see in the graph is a rather steep increase of the demand in energy, and it's specifically in electricity. So we thought we'd need some very responsive and rapid energy sources here. So we decided on both regular gas turbines and also the combined cycle gas turbines to be very useful here to keep up with that steep increase. And also hydro could play a role here. You can see, especially also in the UK, that they have quite some hydro up in the north. So this is definitely a source of energy that should be used during this part of the day. And then when you go from the morning towards kind of the peak around noon, and also the period after that, which is quite stable in demand, we thought that you probably have to go all in with all your energy resources. So this means steam, also the gas turbines, and also renewables like solar and wind can play a role here to overall match the demand that is demanded. So that's basically what we had for the afternoon, and then we've got the evening left.
Yeah, basically the only difference from what my colleagues said, yeah, they keep on using gas turbines and wind turbines, but they might also use solar energy because at that time there maybe a lot of solar radiations has been stored. And finally, they can also, it's likeable, they can burn like waste in incinerators to produce electricity during the late afternoon and evening. And that's it.
Very good points. Thank you all. That looks like you picked a more variable fuel mix to satisfy the demand, which is really what happens in most of the time for most countries. You have a number of sources that come together and try to satisfy the demand. In the meanwhile, while you were talking, I posted another graph in the chat. This time is for solar generation over the last week. Now we're in the UK, so solar is not the most productive, and it is already early October. So the weather is not, let's say, perfect for solar, but you can still see two characteristics I would say for solar. One is it does peak quite high. We still get about 6 gigawatts of power generation as a maximum in that season. It is higher in summertime, of course, and we also, another characteristic is how variable that is. Yeah, during the the middle hours of the day, it peaks quite high, and during the other times of the day, it's pretty much zero. So it has this very significant variation. It's a radical variation of supply, which I would say is quite important to think of when you're trying to increase a lot solar energy in your coursework, for example. Think of how that looks like. Think what you need to do between 6 o'clock in the afternoon and 6 o'clock in the next morning. Because even in a sunny place, you will have exactly the same problem. Yeah, in the UK, okay, it's not necessarily the best, but you could be in the Sahara Desert and have, you know, all the sunlight that you like. It would be exactly the same problem. Maybe, you know, you will have production a little bit later in the day, but production, you can see it, I'm sure, that it, you know, rises spectacularly fast and collapses spectacularly fast every day. So what you're going to be doing for the rest of the hours is a difficult game. But that is why solar in sunny places matches extremely well with energy storage. Yeah, because you have this, you know, nice predictability on the production, that if you could invest in some storage system, either, you know, reversible hydro or car batteries or other large batteries, you could be doing something quite interesting with it. So just a thought, you know, but you can see both the benefit and the trap that solar brings into the system. So have we got any questions about all that? And should we go to the next group, if not? So if you have no questions, then let's go to the next group, please.
Now I can speak for my group.
Please, thank you.
Okay, so what we discussed was that we would use a mix of different energies or energies. That was discussed for groups where the demand is, we would renewables, mostly solar, and during the night time would be like a more, yeah, gas or any I'll say regular use of, I mean, not renewables, but non-renewables energy. And also we talked about how it's different in England or in the UK in general compared to maybe like London, where maybe the demand is not as fluctuant as in other places. Like maybe at night is still pretty high. So if we actually focused on that city, maybe the demand or the usage of non-renewable energy would kind of stay not the same, but it wouldn't change much, given the fact that during the day, during the night, there isn't much of a solar energy generation, and the demand is still pretty. I don't want to say high, but constant. What else do we discuss? Carla, do you want to help me? I think that's pretty much what we said, just a mix of the two. Yes.
Yes, especially during the day, we discussed that you can use the solar power to kind of compensate for the increasing demand during the afternoon hours. And wind energy, we discussed that hydro isn't something that will be used in the UK as much, but wind definitely. And also that wind will be used more towards the evenings or early mornings because the wind power is higher during those times. And then around noon or the noonish hours, solar will be more dominant. And then for the rest, of course, a base of gas.
And one of our teammates also told us about an interesting experiment in 2018 where they tried to use everything except for coal for 3 days straight. And you could see how the renewables could quite well cover the energy usage for over half of it. And I think gas was about 30%. But that's probably also only possible during the summer months because solar can do quite a lot. And then in autumn and winter, it will be quite hard to cover something by solar.
Good. Correct with all of that. I mean, there are numerous times in the UK where coal-fired power stations do not work. In fact, there have been consecutive periods of several weeks without coal at all. So it's not just 3 days. It can last a lot longer than that. I mean, it's not necessarily, the easiest thing of the world. It needs a lot of solar and a lot of wind in that period, but it can happen. Another thing to keep in mind is that even when there is coal generation, this is not necessarily very big because the UK has shut down most of its coal-fired power stations already. So we have very limited coal electricity supply, really. There's a tiny amount left. It's useful sometimes when there is no wind or when there is, very expensive gas like it is right now. But in reality, it's used very rarely. I have posted another 3 graphs for you. So that's nuclear, that's biomass, and that's coal. And what I want you to see, I've selected these 3 because they're very similar. Why are they similar? What is the similarity you can observe?
They're all pretty constant.
Exactly, yeah. I've posted these 3 together because they're all pretty constant. So if you say nuclear kicks in and pretty much it's a flat line, it's what we were saying earlier on, that nuclear is very inflexible. Nuclear is running on steam turbines. Yeah, this is a typical steam turbine behavior. Particularly, it's even worse when you're fueling it with nuclear energy. And then you have biomass. And biomass typically runs, at least in the UK, again, with steam turbines. So again, it's not as constant as nuclear, surely, but it is, up there and stays up there. It doesn't change dramatically, not as much as solar or wind, the way you saw it before. Typically, biomass power stations are power stations which have previously been burning coal, and they're converting from coal to biomass because the nature of the fuel is very similar. It's solid fuel, yeah. So you can burn it in very similar infrastructure. So in the UK, the biggest biomass power station is the Drax power station, which used to be the largest coal-fired power station in the past. So last one here, I have coal, because I just wanted to show you that it's already a week that the UK doesn't use any coal at all for power generation. It has been pretty much zero all along. So that's that. Have you got any questions about these last 3 graphs I've shared? And if not, then I want the last team to step forward. So I hear no questions. So let's go to the last team for now. Has everybody spoken already? Maybe it's my fault. Maybe are we missing a team? I think we're missing a team. No? Okay. Maybe, are we? Yeah.
Sorry, I think my team 4, no one spoke yet. So I think if no one wants to speak, I can speak for my team if we have still time.
Have a go. Yeah. Have a quick one.
Okay, so basically, I mean, we mostly agree with what our colleagues said, and we were thinking about the exercise in terms of energy mix, and we started thinking about wind energy through the night, and then as we see it from the chart, that during a typical summer day, the need for energy starts to skyrocket at around 6:30, 7 a.m. in the morning. We say that solar energy may be it can answer part of the energy demand. We checked on some charts from a British report, and we saw that even if United Kingdom doesn't have a very huge irradiation potential, still it has invested a lot, it seems, in solar panels. So through the day, solar photovoltaic panels can answer the demand. And then we were looking at the peak load of energy demand at 5:30 in the PM in the afternoon. And then we say that maybe it's required to have a combination of conventional fossil fuels and other, kind of energy sources that can be balanced through time and that can be started with that they needed production to be scheduled ahead. So forecasting and scheduling of energy production, mixing between renewables and non-renewables is crucial. And then, from our discussion, as you were joining us, Professor, we were speaking about the smart grids. So we were just, one of my colleagues mentioned about smart grids. So basically that, in order to achieve and accomplish a perfect energy mix and in order to save energy losses, smart grid implementation is crucial. And if my colleague wants to say something more about smart grids, as he mentioned them, he can join us. Otherwise, I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you. So if we do not have any other comments on that, I've just posted another couple of slides. These are essentially large hydro and energy storage. So I'm mostly posting them here for you to see a little bit. Again, hydro and storage in the UK tend to be very spiky. So they do respond very rapidly when there is a requirement for electricity supply. But if you see, like for hydro, you will see that there is always a kind of a constant hydro production, right? Around 250 megawatts. And then anything above that is circular. It keeps coming back and forth on certain hours of the day when there is a peak demand. Like hydro will just kick in to cover that. And that is in the nature of hydro, because as we said, hydro is a type of energy that responds rapidly when that is required. However, what I want you to see is the units. So the peak demand for hydro in the UK is 893 megawatts, which is tiny. Yeah, that's below 1 gigawatt. It's essentially 0.9 gigawatts, which, if, for example, you go and you compare it with, with wind, wind's peak was 13 gigawatts. Yeah, so it's about 15, 16 times bigger. So I want you to keep that in mind, that hydro, particularly in the UK, is a tiny amount of energy that can only serve for very delicate fine tuning of matching between supply and demand. It cannot really produce a significant amount of energy. It's not a country that has a lot of hydro, unfortunately. And the same is happening with storage. Yeah, it's a very similar setup. Again, not a huge amount of power produced, but again, extremely spiky, and it is there to just inject a little bit of power into the system to stabilize it, and then it collapses again, and then it picks up again when it's needed. So I think these graphs are quite useful for all of you, to have a feel of how the different types of energy really react, over a period of time, and how the periodicities are there and all of that. I hope they do trigger you to, think a little bit what works and what doesn't, and when it works and when it doesn't. With that in mind, I'm thinking, do you want to have a quick break now? Shall we? Let's say for 15 minutes or something like that? Yep.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, that's going to be a quick break, and then we'll carry on, and maybe we'll finish a few minutes before 5 o'clock. 5, or I don't know. Well, no, whatever. Not 5. 3. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, I've lost the time. It's okay. See you in a bit. Obviously, I need a break. See you in a bit.
Thank you.
Hello. So, hope everybody's back. Let's carry on with with the rest of what we have to do today. So there are two things I wanted to share with you for today, and that's not. I mean, one is some resources I have from on online YouTube sources that I want you to keep an eye on. It's not so much about. I mean, I know you're all busy and everything, but if you have time at certain periods to listen to an interview, to listen to a small YouTube clip, I'll want to share with you a couple of links. So let me do this right now, and I'll let you know a little bit more about it as we go. So that would be, where are they? Here they are. So here's the one. So here's the first. It's two YouTube channels really that I will be sharing with you, and the other one is here. So the one is the Just Have a Think, and the other one is the Cleaning Up web channels, and they're quite different in nature, but quite impactful in the way they approach issues. So the Just Have a Think is a very I'd say basic video website where there is this one specific speaker looking out at information relevant to climate and sustainable energy, and he addresses quite a number of issues, but of course he doesn't go into a very significant level of detail. And it's a web channel. It's a YouTube channel which is very well attended, as you see. He has 340,000 subscribers, and some of his videos have been viewed for millions of times. But they're overall, I would say relatively basic videos. But they're worthwhile in terms of they're small videos, like 15 minutes or so. So you can take a look, and if you always wanted to, take a quick go at understanding what this or that issue might be, it is a good idea to just check it out and, have a quick piece of information to you. Now, the other one, the Cleaning Up, is very different, and it tells you all you need to know about how YouTube works. So, Cleaning Up is run essentially by Michael Liebreich, who is a guru in the energy world. I don't know if some of you have come across his work. So maybe some of you have heard of the Bloomberg's new energy finance function. Do you know that? Like Bloomberg new energy finance. Have you heard of that?
Maybe it's something related to ESG.
It's more depth. It has more depth than that, I would say. So new energy finance in Bloomberg is, other than a news agent, is also a very specialized let's say investment intelligence company supplier. So for subscribers, it provides a very significant depth of information on markets overall. And at some point, Michael Liebreich founded the New Energy Finance, which was then bought by Bloomberg at some point. So that was essentially the beginning of market intelligence for energy. So he's, like I said, he's really, in a way, very, very much a guru in these areas of financial markets for energy and climate and so on. His channel is, I would say, of very significant depth. He basically, with every one of his videos, he interviews a speaker for 40 minutes up to an hour, where they talk about a number of energy-related issues. Of course, it's always funny to me to see that this channel, which is really a gold mine of interviews, has only 900 subscribers. And some of the videos are watched, 100 times or 80 times or whatever. Where in reality, I would pay good money to watch some of these interviews. Some of the speakers are world leaders as well in their respective areas. You will see interviews here with Nicholas Stern, the father of climate economics. You will see interviews with Greg Jackson, for example, a super important one of the most innovative energy companies in the world. He's the CEO, Greg Jackson is. You will see interviews with academics, with NGOs, people with Christiana Figueres, from the United Nations. So it is, I would say, there is no end to high-profile interviewees in this series. So I would encourage you to take a look. I mean, they're quite lengthy videos. That is the main disadvantage. But if you have time to take a look to some of them, maybe you'll see something that you would enjoy. Take a look at the CVs of the speakers and make up your mind, if a topic is of interest to you, if a speaker is of interest to you, have a go and see what you think. So I just thought it would be a good idea for me to share these resources with you. So, in the long term, it's not something which I expect you to do this week or the next week, but generally speaking, if you stay interested in this area of decarbonization and net zero, I think these are resources that you can keep in touch with, and make sure that you have a go at them, every now and then, to stay up to date and really enhance your learning. So that's that. Let me now share with you some more slides. So here I go, and here we are. So I'm now sharing my fourth slide deck with you, and that is about wind energy. Now, obviously, we will not manage to go into a lot of detail with it today, but I think it's important to make a start, especially because we have already in our previous classes covered quite a lot of ground with wind energy. We have talked about a lot of issues, so I think we're not starting from zero, which is good. So a few things that I have here for you. I mean, this is a slide that starts really in the same way that you would expect. So pictures of wind turbines, you've seen them before, we discussed about them extensively. So I'm going to move quickly and take you to here. So the issue really with wind energy is that we have different energy production for different wind speeds, yeah? So a wind turbine, if I go back here, imagine, you see these wind turbines out there, and there is zero wind. So there is no wind at all. What would you expect the wind turbines to do? What are they doing? Are they turning? Are they not turning? What is happening? Come on, that's easy.
I would say nothing happens if there is no wind, right?
Correct. Turbines are just sitting there, they're idling, they don't move, and there is no energy production. And then suddenly, there's a very small wind blowing, a tiny wind of, let's say, that goes with a speed of 1 meter per hour, 1 meter per second. So there is a wind that travels with about 1 meter per second. What happens then? That wind hits the blades of these turbines. Do they turn? Do they not turn? What's going on? Any ideas? No? No ideas?
Not turn.
They don't turn. Okay, correct. If it was 1 meter per second, then the wind turbines would not turn. Why wouldn't they turn?
Because the wind is not enough strong to move them.
Yeah, correct. So anything that needs to start moving needs a force that would, help it overcome its inertia. So that force needs to be of a specific strength, and only then that inertia can be overcome. So that means that, wind speed of 1 meter per second, as we're finding out in practice, is not good enough to overcome the inertia of these wind turbines. And they have quite a lot of inertia, yeah, because they're very big, they're very heavy, the blades are of a significant size and weight. The mechanism that goes inside the turbine, again, is quite heavy. And all of that has to turn. All of that has to take enough energy from the wind and start turning. So it's a significant amount of energy that is required. 1 meter per second, normally not enough. Very few turbines could ever start in that kind of speed. I mean, maybe they're made of paper, maybe they can start, because then they would be very light and a tiny amount of wind can do it. But these large ones, no chance. If it was 2 meters, 2.5, 3 meters, the wind speed keeps growing. Now, if the wind speed keeps growing, there's a certain wind speed for which these wind turbines will start turning, right? So we keep increasing the wind speed. There will be a point where the wind speed is just about enough to make the wind turbines start turning. So there is a wind speed that does that. And that wind speed is different for every wind turbine, for every design, yeah? There are big wind turbines which are heavy and might need more wind. There are other wind turbines which might be lighter and need less wind. But what is important for us to know is that there is a specific wind speed below which the wind turbines will not turn, and above which wind turbines will start turning. So what does that mean in terms of actual energy production implications? It means that when we look at a certain area, onshore or offshore, we know the statistics, for example, of what kind of wind speed is taking place in that area. What kind of winds do you have in that area? You will have, your anemometers located there. You will be checking that area's wind potential. So if that wind speed in that area is predominantly below the wind speed that is required for a wind farm to start producing energy, then it means that that wind farm will be, producing zero for a very large part of the year. So it might not be, an ideal place to have wind turbines. So that's then the first thing. Certain speed allows wind turbines to start moving. Then when the wind turbines start turning, let's imagine, I can tell you already that this normally is at about, depending on the design, at about 2.5 meters. Some different models can have up to 5 meters per second required wind speed to start producing energy. What do you think? When you start producing energy, is that a lot of energy? If it is just, 2.5 meters, or is it not a lot? What do you think?
Not a lot.
Correct. So if a wind turbine's maximum output is, for example, let's say 1 megawatt, you wouldn't expect the wind turbine to produce immediately once the wind, with a tiny wind, the maximum output it has, yeah? It probably wouldn't. The only thing you expect it to do is start turning little by little, and only gradually maybe making a little bit of electricity, yeah? So not a lot, but again, a little bit of electricity. And it is only with higher wind speed that more can happen. So if the wind speed, for example, goes from 2.5 when your wind turbine started turning goes from 2.5 meters to 10 meters per second. What would you expect to happen? Would you produce more electricity with that?
Yes.
Yeah, that sounds about reasonable. Yeah, if there is more wind, you would expect the wind turbine to produce more electricity. And what is happening there? Is it the more wind, the more electricity? Is there any limit to that? What do you reckon?
I think there is a capacity inside, and if there is a limit, until that limit, it cannot produce anymore. I mean, it cannot sustain.
Correct. So there is at least one first limit at which, even if the wind keeps growing, the wind turbine, the wind speed keeps growing, the wind turbine will not produce more electricity. Yeah, because it cannot absorb any more energy from the wind. So there's an upper limit, as much as there's a lower limit below which a turbine doesn't generate anything. There is also an upper limit of wind speed, above which the wind turbine will not generate any higher amount of energy than it did, with a little bit less wind speed. Typically, for most wind turbines, that is at about 12, 13, 14, 15 meters per second, something like that. Depends on the design and what the turbine is built for. But it's about there, something between 12 and 15, 16 meters per second. At that point, the turbine produces the maximum output that it can produce. And if you keep increasing the wind speed, it won't produce any more. So that is a second important wind speed to have in mind. The first one was the one at which the wind turbine kicks in. And the second important wind speed is the one at which the wind turbine reaches the maximum output. So even more wind will not produce more energy. So let's see a little bit more of what could happen. So if the wind speed keeps increasing, so it goes, hits 15 meters per second, that might be the speed at which we reach the maximum output. And then the wind speed keeps increasing. Let's go, it goes to 25 meters per second. What would you expect to happen? So we don't produce more energy. Do we keep producing maximum energy that we're producing at 15? Is it exactly the same? Is there any other difference? What's your guess? No guesses. Okay, so I can tell you that there is a certain bandwidth above the wind speed at which your wind turbine reaches the maximum output, a certain bandwidth at which the turbine keeps producing almost the maximum amount of energy it can produce. So maybe from 15 to 25, or it depends on the wind turbine and the design. It could keep producing almost the maximum, near the maximum. Depending on the design, it can be a little bit lower than that, but that's, we'll discuss about it later. And then after that, if the wind speed goes crazy, if it goes, to 40 meters per second or 50 meters per second, this is a bit stormy from that point onwards. What happens then?
Maybe you lock the turbine to prevent damage.
Correct. So at that point, the wind speed is so high that if you let it go, if you let it hit the blades and make the blades turn, it might damage them. It might damage the turbine because it could force the turbine to turn much faster than it is safe to turn. So if that were to happen, that could cause the turbine to get damaged. And there is no real benefit of letting that happen because A, it's very expensive to fix a turbine. B, for as long as your turbine requires fixing, it doesn't produce anything. It just stays there and doing nothing. And even more importantly, it can cause other types of failures in the connected turbines next to it and so on. So you don't want to do that. You want to avoid that from happening. So that means that you lock the turbine. So if the wind speed reaches a certain threshold, above which it's considered dangerous to operate a turbine. You just lock the turbine and it doesn't turn at all. So the mechanisms are not anymore exposed to potential damage. Let's see now a little bit what we have with these things. It's what I was showing you earlier. It's this one. So first speed is the one we were talking about earlier, the cut-in speed. So for this one is what we said, that is the wind speed at which your wind turbine starts spinning and generating power. Depending on the wind turbine, that can be 5 meters per second or all the way down to 2.5 meters per second. It depends on the mechanism. So there are gearless wind turbines which don't have a gearbox. That's what that means. They have just power electronics to convert the energy to the correct output that is required by the grid. So it means they have fewer heavy parts inside the turbine. That, as a result, means lower inertia. So it means they can start turning with lower winds. That is what the gearless innovations are all about. They have started some years ago. Now they're almost standard. You see lots of turbines in the market that are gearless. Then there's the power max speed. That is the wind speed at which your turbine generates its nominal output. That's the output for which a turbine was rated at, yeah? So if when you buy a turbine, you will say, yeah, right, I want a turbine which is 5 megawatts or 1 megawatt or whatever, or 10 megawatts if it's very big. So that is the maximum output, the nominal output the turbine can produce at a certain wind speed that is, the maximum it can absorb. Typically, like I'm saying here, depending on the size of the turbine and the design, it can be 8 to 15 meters per second. More typically for the large turbines, you're looking for something around 12 to 15 meters per second. The 8 meters per second is usually for smaller turbines. So this is the power max speed. Then there is a certain wind speed at which your wind turbine has to shut down. So that is the wind speed above which your turbine could be damaged, as we said before. That is your cutoff wind speed. It can be anything between 20 to 30 meters per second, sometimes a little bit higher. Again, these are all design parameters for turbines. So if a turbine is designed to be at a place that has significant storms and it wants to make the best use of them, so it might be designed essentially to be able to take as much energy from these high wind speeds. So it could be that it's a bit higher here, or it could be lower if it's a turbine that is designed with different parameters in mind to operate optimally in a different environment that's milder. So that is your cutoff speed. Then the next speed that we have in terms of identifying turbines is the survival speed. And that is the wind speed at which, above which your wind turbine could be genuinely damaged, even if it's locked. Yes, so you could be having your turbine locked nicely and the blades blocked from moving and all of that, but still the wind is so strong that it could be threatening its stability, threatening to throw it down or anything of that sort, or break a blade or something of that type. So that is a survival speed, and it is a lot higher. It's 50 to 80 meters per second. I mean, these are serious wind speeds. Yeah, that's not. I mean, most of us wouldn't want to be out there at this kind of wind speeds, and they don't happen all the time. Of course, you don't see wind blades, just flying around every day. So these are the wind speeds which are characteristic of a wind turbine design. So have you got any questions up to this point before I move you on to the next stuff? Hopefully that's all clear. So the next thing then is we're looking a little bit at power curves. And power curves typically look a little bit like this one. I will not spend too much time, showing you a lot of details here. I think it's not so important. I think what I'm trying to show you here, maybe I should show you a simpler version, which is here. So here there are two curves. I want you to focus only on the power curve. So it's this line. So forget about the red line. Don't watch the red line. Ignore it. Watch only the blue-green. I don't know, whatever color you think that is. Blue-green line. Check only this one. Is it turquoise, maybe? Something. Who knows? So what you see here is that the wind turbine, I mean, this is for a specific wind turbine. Yeah, every turbine will have its own curves. So the wind speed starts kicking in at about 2 meters, and soon after, the turbine starts producing a little bit of energy. And with the wind speed growing, so if you see what's happening here, the horizontal axis has the wind speed in meters per second, and the vertical axis has power production in kilowatts. So this is a turbine that reaches maximum output of a little bit over 2 kilowatts, probably 2.1 kilowatts, sorry, 2.1 megawatts, so 2,100 kilowatts as a maximum output. And we're going to be trying to see here exactly how it reaches that point. So with the wind speed increasing gradually, your wind turbine starts producing more and more energy. So it does that all the way until the wind speed reaches what level? What is the wind speed at which energy production stops growing?
12.
Yeah, it is 12 meters per second, correct. And at that point, we've reached the maximum production, and then it stays stable all the way until 20 meters per second, 21 maybe, something like that. So that is how that looks like. And then after that, usually the brakes will be applied. Yeah, so that is the point where probably the brakes will be coming in. And you will have to stop the turbine from turning. Now, if I'll take you back to a picture of the turbines, let's go back here. How do you think we do that? So is the energy that the turbine, that the blades get at 15 meters per second, is it the same like the energy they get, the force they get at 20 meters per second? Is it the same or is it different?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Sure, yes. So is the force that hits the blades, is it the same when the wind speed is 12 and 20 meters per second? Or does it change?
Changes.
It changes. And what does it do? Does it grow, right? When the wind speed is higher.
Yeah.
So how do we manage to produce exactly the same energy? How come we take a lot more force from 12 to 20 meters per second, which should be a significant difference, yet we manage to produce exactly the same amount of energy? What do we do there? Any idea?
Maybe there are some technologies that prevent and stops the turbine from turning. And of course, I think that these kind of technologies, for example, brakes, requires energy to work.
Okay, so one thing to think of is, indeed, the turbines have brakes, very much like your car has brakes, similar. So we could, in theory, be applying the brakes to stop them from happening, and sometimes we do. You don't want to be applying the brakes for a long period of time, because they will get overheated and they will get damaged, and you will have also parts of the brakes, needing replacement and so on. So it's an expensive business to do that. You don't want to be doing that. You could be doing it if it's an emergency, but you cannot do it, regularly and a lot of the time. So there's another way to do it. So if you see the blades, it's not a very good picture. Sorry, say it again.
I have a guess. Do they?
Go for it.
Do they turn? I know when you want to take it out of production, you turn it to the side out of the wind's thrust. So do you turn it slightly so that the vector of the wind is off to the side, and so you're not catching 100% of the wind's force on the blades?
Correct. So it's not turning the turbine itself, it is turning the blades. So most typically, the blades rotate around their own axis. So I don't know if you can see, but the way the blades are here are essentially,
So you can
essentially shaped in a way that they face the direction of the wind. Yeah, so the way the wind is coming, it would hit as much of the blade as possible right now. Now, if that was a very windy moment, and it's not clearly here, it's an idling moment for these turbines. If it was a very windy moment, these blades will rotate gradually in a way that a lot less of the surface of the blade would face the vector of the wind. So as a result, there would be less energy absorbed from the blades and into the turbine. So that is how we do it. It's what we call pitch control. It's the pitch control mechanism that typically allows the blades to rotate on their own axis and produce less energy. That's how you normally do it from a mechanical point of view. It has certain limitations, obviously, because the blade, even when you have it in the angle that has as little of its surface exposed to the wind as possible, it still produces energy. Yeah? I mean, less, but it will still harvest some energy. So it can never be, zeroed or anything. It's still something, but it allows you a bit of flexibility there. So that's how we normally do it. What you said before about changing the angle of the turbine, you can also do that a little bit. You don't want to go very far with it because it could start overloading certain sides of the turbine in an unbalanced way. So it can be a bit dangerous. If there are very strong winds, this could be a little bit unpredictable on what it's going to produce on the turbine. So that is your main technique of pitch control. Let me show you a little bit how that might look like here. So if you have a pitch control system, typically you would end up with curves which look a little bit like this orange curve. So a not ideally adjusted pitch control system could end up, that you hit a maximum output at some point, and then you let the blades go back. If you let them go too much to the back, then you will end up, with less energy. Even the wind speed might be higher. But an ideally adjusted pitch control system would hit the maximum output, and then it will be, delicate enough to manage to maintain that output all the way until the cutout speed. Yeah. So that is your standard, kind of representation graphically, depending on the accuracy of the pitch control system. Let me show you this one here, because I think it's a little bit important to understand what is happening in these cases. Now, if you wanted to have the maximum, as high an efficiency as possible from a turbine, and when I say efficiency here, I mean, if you wanted to be converting as much of the wind's energy to electricity as possible, you would probably want your blades to be like large sails, enormous size, that allow you to take as much of the wind's energy and make it into electricity, right? So you would want as little of the wind as possible to be going through your blades and behind them. You'd want to capture as much of it as possible. Obviously, I mean, as you've seen, our wind turbines, that's not how they look like. The blades are relatively skinny. They're not that, that thick or that wide. So what this second curve here shows you, the red one, it shows you the efficiency of that production. So the efficiency at which the wind turbine converts energy from the wind to electricity. And it's quite an interesting one, because what's happening is once the wind starts blowing, very soon, already at around 4.5 meters per second, the wind turbine manages to hit its maximum efficiency, which, if you see, you can see it on the other axis, on the right-hand side axis, is almost 50%. That's 0.5, yeah, which means about 50%. So the efficiency of that conversion reaches almost 50%. So that means that the blades are as much turned towards the wind as possible, and they attract as much of its energy as possible. And then it stays about there for as long as the turbine, keeps growing its output with the wind speed. And then once the output of the turbine reaches the maximum that the turbine is designed to produce, then it's the point where the pitch control starts kicking in. So that's when we let a lot of the wind to go past the blades without it, being captured and allowing for electricity generation. So that is when we start seeing a gradual collapse of the efficiency of the turbine. So it produces electricity less efficiently in reality. That's how it maintains a stable power output, despite the fact that there is more wind energy hitting the blades in reality. Yeah, because there is higher speed. Does that make sense to you? Is it a sensible design here? Can you understand what it shows? Or are you totally lost? Anybody who has no idea what I'm talking about? Nobody? You're all quite comfortable with all that. Okay. That's very good to hear. So every wind turbine that is in the market has a set of these curves. So it will have a graph like this one that explains pretty much how the turbine is expected to operate when it's outside in the field. And there you can see all the parameters that we're talking about, the cut-in speed, the cut-out speed, the survival speeds, and so on. So you can have all of that information there and see what you will expect your turbine to operate. So if you have these curves, and then you also have a little bit of an assessment of what your wind park, wind farm, the area where you might be installing the wind turbines looks like, then that is the point where when you can be making educated, assessments about how much energy your wind farm could be producing. Now, we don't have time to go through that today, so I'm going to leave this for our next class on Wednesday. But it's quite an interesting way that we, of course, there are very scientific ways in which we can estimate that, but there are also simpler ways. And I will be looking forward to show you a little bit how to make these estimations in a relatively simple way. So I will stop today's class here, as I promised to finish you a little bit earlier because we had a very small break today. So before we go, have you got any questions, anything you need to discuss before we all go? No? Okay then. So what I'll do, I'll stop sharing my slides, and then I'll see you all on Wednesday, where we'll continue with a lot of more wind energy. So have a nice afternoon and see you on Wednesday.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.